Cheers.
Welcome aboard Falcor. I'm Leslie.
And I'm Steven.
We are a couple of adventure seekers from the mountains who traded it all in for a new life at sea. Together, we've mastered the art of tiny living in a camper, traveled to amazing places around the world, and now we've begun an endless saga of adventure and boat work aboard our 1981 CNC Landfall 38 Falcor. We invite you to tag along for the ride and support our journey by hitting the subscribe button and joining our Patreon community.
Are you ready to talk about it?
That day?
The day.
The day. That day. Yeah.
Alright.
We left Beaufort, North Carolina, about 5 in the morning.
And it was a little rough. And it was a little windy. And yeah.
We knew it was going to be a little uncomfortable. We saw the forecast. But once we got outside the channel, it was much stronger winds and much bigger waves than were forecasted.
And then we found the weak link in our boat, which happened to be our main.
Yeah.
And,
So, just to paint the picture, we're heading outside the channel. The waves are getting really big. We expected maybe 3 to 6 foot waves. We're seeing that and some 10-foot waves mixed in there.
10 to 12, yeah.
Yeah, with winds of like 20, 25 knots. We were expecting that in gusts, and that was pretty sustained, right?
I'd say we probably had gusts around 35 to 40 knots.
So we were already uncomfortable. We decide once we're out of the channel to put the main up so that we can have the boat be a little more balanced, which is when it gets real fun. Because I get to take over for my first time ever driving our boat, or really any boat, out in the ocean. I have to point us into the wind, which means I am barreling straight into these 10 to 12 foot waves, basically launching the boat. Falcor was jumping while he's trying to put the main up. And I was struggling to stay directly into the wind, so the halyard kept getting wrapped around the shrouds, which was fully my fault there. And so he'd have to stop what he was doing and try to mess with that. Meanwhile, there's a piece of line at the back of the boom that usually holds the halyard up. He undid that to connect the halyard to the sail. And so now that line, as we're going into the wind, is swinging around in front of my face, smacks me in the eye. So I'm trying to drive into 10-foot waves. Now I have one eye, so I'm a pirate, driving like this. Arr. And then what happened?
And then, as we got the main up and got ready to hook Cunningham up at the reef, and we came got about beam to the wind and managed to fill the sail and boom shot across, and with all that shock load basically ripped the whole luff out of the main and tore it out right at the grommet for the reef.
And then after that happened, it split the other direction. So now we've got a tear this way and this way in our sail. And it's flying back towards me.
Yes, it was a flag. We turned our main into our main flag.
Which is not what you want. So we called it a day, soaking wet, cold, defeated. Went back to the anchorage and dropped the hook again about 9 a.m. and just watched movies for the rest of the day. Tried to get warm. And then assessed the damage of the main. That was a bummer. That was a real bummer. But the beauty is, we reached out to our communities here on Instagram and on Facebook, and not only found out that we were in good company of people who had gotten their butts kicked in that same channel, but we found a really kind stranger on the internet who gave us their old Maine. Just gave it to us out of the kindness of their heart. So shout out to Heather, our number one shore crew at the moment. And yeah, we got to pick that up in Hilton Head and do some more offshore sailing and motoring, which you'll see later in this episode, where things get a lot better, conditions got a lot better, and complete 180 from that day.
It's a different day.
Different day. But I think we had to give it some time before we really talked about it and shared what happened, because that was a miserable day.
Yeah, it was not a great day.
Yep. That's the cruising life for you.
After a cozy day of lounging and warming up, we assessed the damage of the sail. This main came with the boat and it has definitely seen better days. Because it's so old, we knew it was likely to tear at some point, and we just got lucky that it happened so close to shore. So we did our best to flake it on the boat and store it so we can use pieces of it for future projects and repairs. After that day, things started to get a lot better. We continued moving south along the ICW, stopping in Hilton Head, South Carolina for, you guessed it, some more boat work. While we were tied up to the dock in Hilton Head, we went for a long land stroll to re-up supplies and provisions. Took apart the winches to clean and grease them up, and took advantage of the space on the dock to reflake the torn up mainsail. It has been such a productive couple of days here at the dock. We were able to get our dinghy motor fixed. We received our free new to us main after blowing ours up offshore a few weeks ago. We got it set up on the boom. Stephen was able to repair some of the tears on the mainsail cover. So we are all set up and ready to go offshore, possibly tomorrow. We were so excited to set up the new to us mainsail we received. We want to send a big thank you to our shore crew, Heather for the donation, as well as Bill and Julie Clipper for delivering the package to our dock. We couldn't make this happen without you guys. The next morning, it was time to hoist up our new mainsail again, leave the ICW, and head offshore for a few days of island hopping through South Carolina, into Georgia, and on to Florida. This time, we had a much more favorable forecast ahead of us. Our first day offshore with the new to us main was 51 nautical miles, all downwind. It was a pretty rolly sail, but we were happy to be out on the ocean. When we came into the Sapelo Sound Inlet, our first stop in Georgia, we were greeted with large breakers to the north, big waves in the channel, and only 2 buoys marking the entire channel. We made it to the anchorage safely and celebrated with some much-deserved sundowners and a gorgeous sunset. Offshore day number 2 in this island hopping excursion was super mellow. Only a 26 nautical mile jaunt into the Doughboy Sound of Georgia, where we were greeted with more breakers at the channel, and we may or may not have grounded while going 7 knots in an area that was charted at 14 feet. When we reached the anchorage safely, Stephen climbed up the mast for the 3rd time this month to change our masthead light. Then the next morning we were up early, for our biggest day to date so we could reach the northernmost part of Florida. The weather was so calm, we had negative wind and an absolutely glassy ocean. We motored for about 56 nautical miles on what felt like a lake so that we could reach Fernandina Beach before sunset. Our offshore adventures were a success, worlds away from our first attempt, and then we uncovered our newest challenge when our anchor dragged and Falkor took itself for a quarter-mile walk while we were not on the boat. But that's a story for another time. For now, we're happy to be in warmer weather. The butter hasn't melted just yet, but it's soft enough to bake cookies. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Falkor Sailing. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, join our Patreon community to support the journey, and give this video a like.